because I've heard some folks say it's awkward. It feels awkward, right? Like we're communicating on Zoom right now, right? And that's one level, but take out the screen and stand face to somebody, and eye contact is different, and energy and how you feel is different. Talk about that difference for you.
I absolutely understand that statement, previous statement that people say where it's like it's awkward. Because I feel like when you're behind the screen like this, I can think a little longer about what I'm about to say, even if it's like a split second difference. Whereas in person, I recently just had to have like a I had, you see how like I'm talking, I had to have an interaction with people outside of like Zoom or anything like that recently, for like about like 3 hours. And I was sitting there the entire time, like second guessing every single thing I said. And it's, I think that's attributed to the fact that when I'm texting or I'm on the phone, like I can think and then I can backtrack. I can delete the message or something like that. Like, whereas in person, like it's very raw is the word I would use. I am Kendall Brutus. I am a recent graduate of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Graduated with a degree in forensic psychology with a minor in counseling. I think it's really intimidating working in any field, coming straight out of college or even being in college. Like I was so intimidated my first internship. I was so scared, um, not just on the education level, but on top of like being like without any real experience. Also grew up online as well. So like that other social anxiety factor that's in there. This fear of being vulnerable as well. It's a lot that's kind of packed into it.
Help folks that are employers, current employers, understand your generation. What do you need? Because sometimes I don't think I'm sensitive to that. I didn't grow up that way. And so for me, going up and having a conversation with somebody is like no big deal. Even, in college or high school, that was just what you did. You talked to people, but that's not the way it is anymore. So what advice would you give folks to understand your generation, Kendall?
I think there was a big difference in the way I grew up and how my little sisters grew up as well, because when COVID hit for them, they were in like middle school and elementary school. And I feel like those were core times to really learn how you'll interact with other people. And even still, like I was so concerned for my little sisters, especially because it was like, oh my goodness, they're gonna grow up and not really have those skills to like kind of communicate with people. But then I realized that I really sucked in college at networking and communicating with other people, because not only did I go through the COVID epidemic with like online school and things of that nature, but I was also on social media and I was also doing this and that. My little sisters they weren't on social media at that time. And I was just kind of like in high school at the same time, social media at some time, COVID. It was just like a whole like not really knowing myself type of thing. And then going off into college and then doing internships and things of that nature. I think it's difficult to connect with people because you have no idea like if they're ever being their true selves, because we get a lot of ourselves from online. So, and then like social media nowadays, like everything's recorded, everything is like captured. Like it's just you become very desensitized to human interaction and human behavior and things of that nature. So I will say it's difficult starting conversations with strangers because you can just go online and start those conversations with strangers instead of having to do it in person, and you get used to it. And in college, I went to a commuter school. Like John Jay is like in the city, so there's no real campus. It's just a couple of buildings, and you don't have dorms unless you choose to dorm in a hotel or something like that. And it was a very like you go to class and you leave. And I feel like that's a lot of people's experiences. And I think that's what makes it difficult compared to not having the internet growing up. It's just you don't have to practice talking to other people like you had to when you're like younger and like that. And now you don't have to practice, so it's just kind of like, why do it? Like, what's the point? Because it's easier not to. Um, But as I'm getting older, I prefer to talk to people in person than I do online because it's just kind of like I don't even go on Instagram like that anymore. I don't do any of that. Previous self, I was obsessed with Instagram. I was obsessed with Snapchat. I was obsessed. Personally, I'm still obsessed with TikTok. I'm trying to break that. But I think it's just easier to be online. So that human interaction, you don't have to practice. You don't have to do any of that.
Right? You're filming something, you're
Mhm.
putting a filter on it, and you're putting it up, right?
Mhm.
Like wallpaper versus face-to-face interaction, right? Talk about, because I've heard some folks say it's awkward. It feels awkward, right? Like we're communicating on Zoom right now, right? And that's one level, but take out the screen and stand face to face to somebody, and eye contact is different, and energy and how you feel is different. Talk about that difference for you.
I absolutely understand that statement, previous statement that people say where it's like it's awkward. Because I feel like when you're behind the screen like this, I can think a little longer about what I'm about to say, even if it's like a split second difference. Whereas in person, I recently just had to have like a I had, you see how like I'm talking, I had to have an interaction with people outside of like Zoom or anything like that recently, um, for like about like 3 hours. And I was sitting there the entire time, like second guessing every single thing I said. And it's I think that's attributed to the fact that when I'm texting or I'm on the phone, like I can think and then I can backtrack. I can delete the message or something like that. Like whereas in person, like it's very raw is the word I would use. And it's people aren't used to that, I guess, that like rawness of talking. And then it's easier to just like sometimes the default is to lie. And then you're like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? And now I can't backtrack because it's already out of my mouth. And it happens to me like a few times. Like it's easier, like I'm just talking and then I'm like, wait, why did I just say that? That's not true. And then it's too late to backtrack. And it's because I haven't had to practice talking in like real life to real people in a like minute when I was younger. And going into college, I was like, that was a whole nother thing. Like finding myself and then having friends the same age that were finding themselves. And then it was just like a whole, like, it's a whole nother layer to the whole social interaction thing. And I think awkward is the way to describe it. So like going into like businesses and having to network with like people like adults who are like already further in their field, extremely intelligent. It's like you don't want to do that. Like you just want to kind of like just not do that. And that's why nowadays like I don't really have any like I think I have like one or two friends that are interested in doing anything outside of like social media or like YouTube or like PR or anything like that. And because it's a comfortability that comes with being online that we're used to compared to being in person. Like they will avoid it at all costs. And it makes sense to me because I grew up with that. But at the same time, I also feel like there is a need for human interaction at some point. And yeah, so I don't know. Yeah.
It's amazing. Like truly, Kendall, it's so insightful. I really, really appreciate it. Melissa, I'm sure you have a billion thoughts.
I certainly do. I wanted to highlight one of the things that you said, where sometimes you say something and then you're like, wait, that's not even true. Why did I just say that? And this has happened to me. And so, and I think part of it, yes, is like when you have time to kind of process and decide your response that allows you to either connect more with your values or think of the honest answer. But I think what happens in that kind of shortcut moment when you're face to face, and you can tell me if this is what's happening for you as well, is that there's something underneath you that's running. And for me, it's often like the need to connect with that person or to want to feel accepted or like you belong where you are. And so you're kind of shortcutting the information to stay maybe agreeable or to be in alignment with this person. And but then you realize like, well, that was a silly thing. That's not even true for me, but I just said it. And now I'm like, whoa, this is awkward. I remember I really struggled growing up with just the simple question when someone would go, hey, have you heard this song before? Or this band? Or like that's a simple, innocent example. And I'd be like, yeah, totally. And then they're like, oh, what's their name? And then you're like,
Yeah.
why you gotta test me, you know? But it comes up even like you're saying, maybe in kind of this socializing, networking, the pressure goes up to feel like you can connect and almost assimilate on an extreme level, but it's really about wanting to be in alignment and in agreement with the people around you because you want to have that positive experience. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like you absolutely hit on a really big topic. And I think all this literally boils down to this obsession that we have, like my generation especially, we have this obsession with being the same. Like I remember it would fluctuate, it would be, oh, we don't want to be the same. Oh, you don't want to be a sheep. You don't want to, follow the same rules. You want to be different. But now, like, there's like this really, really interesting thing that's happening. And I think it attributes to things like TikTok or things like Instagram, where it's like it's so easy to pick up trends and things that people like. Like, I literally just bought some ballet flats. I have never been interested in wearing flats ever. But I keep seeing people wear flats, and I'm like, oh, I want flats now. And I was obsessed with the idea of having flats. And I'm like literally I have never owned a water bottle. And now I'm like, I have a water bottle. It's like this obsession with being the same that we have. And I find it so interesting. But yes, absolutely. I found myself like literally trying to be agreeable and likable to the point that I'll agree or say something that I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't like that band. I don't like that music. Okay, I guess. And it's just like, why did I say that? But I said it because I want to be liked. But absolutely, I would have never explained that as well as you did. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hadn't heard anyone so honestly just say like I've lied to people when I'm talking with them, and then I was like, oh, I've done that too. Why did I do that?
Yeah.
Um, yes, the you said the word trends, and I think that that's perhaps the kind of increased desire that you're describing, that you feel like it's really important to your generation. I do remember it being important to my generation as well. If everybody was wearing we all wore bomber jackets, like we all had a certain type of shoe or jacket or hats for a while, right? And fashion can do it fast. But these trends, especially when so much of the time is on a screen, it can happen faster and faster, and wider spread. So even if you went from Florida to DC to California to Minneapolis, right? You might even see the same trends happening simply because we have so much, I mean, forget that, even abroad, right? Um, and I think the other word that came to my mind is the sense of belonging, which I think all generations have the desire to belong and feel like they belong to the people around them. We do also have this drive to feel unique and special, but there's something about not feeling outside of the communities that we're in that kind of these trends and these things kind of express themselves and give us almost that shortcut again to connecting and feeling that sense of belonging.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I feel like it's gotten kind of like worse, especially when it comes to like having our own opinions. Um, I see it all the time on like things like TikTok where it's like the comment, like I'll like people have very like one-sided ideas and they just follow the people, what they're saying in the comments or like what the creator's saying or like anything like that. I'm like, well, there's always two ways of thinking of different things, and people don't do that anymore. And I have a feeling that it's getting worse because it's easier to just follow somebody that you like. I don't know. I feel like there was YouTube creators at a certain point, and that was like the big thing. And then there was Instagram, and there were Instagram like we didn't even call them influencers. I don't believe at first. Like we just said they were big on Instagram. Yeah, from Instagram, whatever. But now we have a whole career of influencing, and more and more people are striving for that. And when you have careers such as influencing and influencers, and then you have the people that follow these influencers, it kind of like they stop thinking for themselves. Like they just kind of follow whatever that person online is saying, despite not knowing that person all the way. They'll feel that they know this person deeply. Like I had to do some research on the idea of parasocial relationships, which I didn't realize was as big as it was. I thought maybe it was like one or two people within every county who like have this idea that they're connected. No, it's like a lot of people who believe they have connections with these people online. And I feel like that's also like that's why it's important to have human social interactions, because when there's a lack of it, well, it makes sense when you have a ideal relationship with this person that you've been following for a long time online, because you don't really have that interaction outside of online. So yeah.
It reminds me of having like a celebrity crush for my group, for my generation, right? That celebrity crush would be the thing that you could obsess about, and you couldn't really follow them, right? But because the word to follow is very much a social media word in this case, but we would see them in a TV show, or we religiously watch that show. And of course, this was before even TV could be recorded or streamed. So you had to almost like put it into your ritual, right? If you wanted to see that person on the screen, whether that was a news person or an actor, a singer, we went to go to their concerts all the time to see them. We couldn't just watch that concert online or check. I mean, MTV did a good job of giving us their music videos, right? And VH1, I actually did like VH1 as well. Um, I want to go back really quickly about the part about thinking for yourself. First, I'd like to acknowledge that you have a heightened sense of self-awareness that I just want you to know. If no one has ever told you that, you have it. And I think it's really, really important that you have that. And I think that we all could continue to develop our sense of self-awareness, and it's really becomes key in making sure that we are comfortable in our identities, that we are confidently moving forward, that we're making the choices that we want to build the lives that we want.
Absolutely.
The piece about, oh, give me a second, my mind just went blank for a second.
Okay.
Oh, about thinking for yourself. Do you feel that like you were challenged in school or in your internships or any kind of work experience to do critical thinking?
Mm, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
An example for the internship, when they handed me assignments, it wasn't ask questions first. It was kind of like try it first and then ask questions later. Which kind of like writing memoranda. Like I've never written a memo before in my life, and that was my first assignment. I had to write a memo um, surrounding the new legislation of abortion laws within the states, because we were trying to figure out if a New York doctor, because it's legal in New York, um, wrote a prescription for someone who lived in Texas where it's not legal. Could they be extradited from New York to Texas? And that was like, I was like, are you sure you want me to do this assignment? First of all, I was like it's my first time doing some legal research. Like, and that's a whole nother thing. Like, it's ridiculous how many hoops you have to jump through to find actual legislation. Like, it's insane. I'm like, wait a second, this should be public knowledge, but it's not. So absolutely, I had to like learn those types of, I guess, skills. And then when it came to like, miscellaneous work, like faxing and scanning and things of that nature, you have to learn that by yourself, kind of. But I wasn't afraid to ask, hey, does this button like blow up the machine or something like that? And then going back to school, college. Absolutely. I feel like that was like my last semester of college was very much just critical thinking. There was like I was taking 5 courses, and it was very much like we were talking about different laws in a lot of my classes, and kind of like if you were doing this case, how would you blah, 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 this or that? Kind of like putting those skills to use that we've learned over the semesters. But it was based on our own ideas and thoughts and opinions. And a lot of my classes were online too for this last semester because I just preferred online classes. But I think on top of all this is like that college experience. The only reason I encourage anybody to go to college, if they have the means and they have the privilege, is to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds who have so many different opinions. I think the hardest thing was learning that people had like outlandish thoughts that I've never had in my life. And having to sit there and be like, it's okay that I'm sitting next to this person that I have completely different beliefs, political views, things of that nature. And I stand to this day, I say that was the hardest part of college, just sitting next to somebody who's just being really ignorant, I guess. And I think that was a part of the critical skills teaching as well, is like being able to maneuver those conversations respectfully, because that's life. You're gonna be working under people who don't agree with you and you don't have the same views and things of that nature. And then there was also just, again, putting the things we've learned over the semesters in use, and having those open discussions and being able to separate personal views from facts. And yeah, absolutely. College and those internships, like this internship right now is teaching me the AI stuff. I had no idea what that is, and I'm doing it. And curriculum building, I didn't realize how difficult that is. Like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. Um, just I think the conversations were the most critical skills building piece I've learned through college and the internships, which I think is important because I think that's half of getting further in life, is just conversations with the right people at the right time and being agreeable at certain points, even when you don't agree with some of the things that are being said. You just kind of have to nod and smile and keep it going. And so like when I would sit in classes, at one point I missed about 5 classes in this one semester for this one class because I was so anxious about just sitting in a classroom full of people who were minding their business, weren't thinking about me one bit, but in my brain convinced me that people were noticing me and this or that. And if my stomach made a noise, like, they'd be like, ew, or blah, blah, blah. Like my brain was literally on 100 the entire time I was sitting in a classroom full of people. And luckily, I was doing really well in the class, like work wise, but she reached out to me. She's like, you're missing so many classes. I'm gonna have to demote you a grade. But I know you're like really good at what you're doing. So I'm very confused. Like, is there something wrong with the class? Like, blah, blah. And I just was open and honest with her. And of course, like she understood and things of that nature. But I think that was one thing that COVID absolutely heightened for me, was just sitting in a classroom full of people. Um, when it's like quiet, I guess I get really anxious thinking all crazy thoughts. Um, and that's something I had to learn to get rid of. Like I had to force myself into situations where I would be in a quiet classroom full of people. And it was a whole thing, but I think once I got over that and I was able to attend classes that were absolutely brilliant classes to attend, and professors were absolutely brilliant, and sitting with people who had the same views, different views, I think that was just the entire college experience for me that made the difference. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Kendall, you grew up with everyone looking at you, so to speak, in regards to how social media makes you feel, right? Constantly. And this is girls on social media have a different experience than boys do on social media. The year Instagram got big, the year Facebook bought Instagram, suicide rates of girls quadrupled.
Mhm.
It's everyone's looking at me, right? That's what social media does. And so it makes complete sense that when you carry that into the real world, you have that same thought, right? Everyone's looking at me. And we know, right, when we step back from it, that everyone is probably in that same classroom was thinking the exact same thing as you. They are so in their own head. they're too narcissists to be thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, right? But we don't realize that. That's such a transition. And I think for folks that didn't grow up online, we don't realize that. We don't realize that that's what's going through your head. And we need to understand that better so we can engage and help that next generation hopefully not feel that way forever.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into my sister's head, like as like they're growing up, just to kind of remind them that I like tell them every day that they're beautiful and things of that nature, and that they're intelligent, that they're smart, and all of that. Because when um I was growing up, and my mom did everything she could to keep me off social media, like everything, and she still does. Like she doesn't have like my youngest sister on social media, so they have like I feel like that generation has like just they've grown so quickly. Like I was just joking with a couple of girls I was talking with the other day about how like neither of my sisters went through an ugly phase, like at all. Like they just grew up beautiful. Like I was so confused. Like that's not fair. But a lot of people have beliefs that they can literally it's the effects of social media, which I think that's true in some ways, but I also think that's just how it is. Every generation goes up faster than the other. So, but I think that was important to instill in their heads from a very young age that like remind them every day that they're beautiful and they're intelligent and that their life matters, obviously, and that they're worth everything. And yeah.
Well, I've met you, Kendall, and you are amazing, and you are going to set the world on fire. I have no doubt about it. So
Okay,
big things for you, my dear. Absolutely.